Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another JazzInc 1/6 scale Star Wars vehicle review. Now today we are going to be taking a look at none other than their Ray Speeder from The Force Awakens. Now this was manufactured in an unlicensed, unofficial capacity. That means they don't have the correct intellectual property rights to actually sell this as a Star Wars branded item. Do bear that in mind when you are making your purchasing decisions. I have popped the link to their website in the description below. This isn't a promotional video, this is a review on a vehicle I picked up for my own personal collection. What we are going to do now though is get all of the accessories that come with the speeder laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything it comes with. Here we have all the parts and pieces. Now, starting off with the display base first, technically you do get two. The larger of which is meant for Ray's speeder, and the smaller one is meant for BB-8. You do have two clear acrylic rods that insert into the top and then insert into Ray's speeder, so when it's sitting there it kind of makes it look like it is hovering. Now, don't get me wrong, you can very clearly see these, but in the right lighting conditions and maybe with a backdrop, it can be a very convincing effect. The display base itself is very geometric and angular, and it is a nice lightweight plastic. I don't need everything to be overly heavy. I prefer my pieces to be as lightweight but as sturdy as possible, so I'm all for this. I like the way it's painted, there's shading and speckling on the surface. But arguably, for me, the more impressive of the two bases is the BB-8 one. It has a ton of sand texture, it looks very organic, and there is also a ton of shading throughout. This is my preferred look for a Ray Speeder display base. I would have loved if the larger base could have looked exactly like this. Now you do of course get the netting that does attach to the side of Ray's speeder. You will see that on there in just a second. And then a ton of parts and pieces that is meant to be space junk. You do get some plastic ones such as these, but you also get some real metal pieces. They're all fully weathered, they're filthy, they're dirty and grimy, and as I said, you can store them all in this netting. These would be found parts and pieces on Jakku that Ray has harvested and put in the netting. What we are going to do now though is get the speeder itself out here and take a closer look. Here we have Ray's speeder seemingly floating on its display base. Those two clear acrylic rods play their part perfectly. Now before we get stuck into it, I do have to say one thing. I'm super glad that it was JazzInc who decided to tackle this particular project, because it's right up their alley. They learnt a ton from the various Batmobile projects as well as the Land Speeder, and I think this might just be one of their most challenging projects yet, because it does actually have to appear as though it's floating. Now, it is a very hefty piece. I was hoping it was going to be a touch lighter, but that just means that this thing feels like quality. I know a lot of you equate heft to quality, so if that's the case for you, you are going to love the way this thing feels in hand. Now, throughout the course of the video, we will be taking it off the display base, going hands-on and checking out the details up close, as well as, of course, popping Ray on the back, because it's not really Ray's speeder without Ray sitting on said speeder. What we are going to do now though is take it off the rotating turntable, punch in and take a closer look at the details. Now of course, to complete the look, I was able to attach the netting. I did achieve 4 points of contact, so it is movie accurate, and I've placed all of the space junk inside. You can fit all of the components in here, and even though some of them are die-cast, it doesn't sag down too much. I love the way this looks, and I like that it's weathered, so it matches the aesthetic of the rest of the speeder. Although mine didn't come with any instructions, so I kind of had to fumble my way through and try and figure out how to get this done. I'm happy with the end result, but I think some instructions might have made the process a little bit easier. I also had two pieces that need to be attached at the back here, being these foot panels. They do just simply peg into place, and they are keyed, so they can only go on the correct side that they're supposed to, so no worries there. Before we start doing some pans and checking out the detail and the paint applications, I do want to talk about the build. This thing is hefty. It's very heavy. I wouldn't advise popping this on top of a detolf or on a glass shelf, but it's entirely up to you. If you think your glass shelf can take it, then by all means, give it a go. The front section is made out of a high density yet hollow resin, so that means there's a ton of detail on the surface. It's super sturdy, but also it's a little bit lighter than it could have been. If this was entirely solid, this thing would have been at least twice the weight that it is now, which would have made it untenable, in my opinion, for the display. This strikes a nice balance between being a little bit too heavy and being suitably sturdy. I understand why they made the choices they did. Now, around the back, you do have a thinner and lighter section. This is done so that when you pop Ray on here, it's not going to sag down and look goofy on the display base. All of the weight is on the front, so it kind of acts as a counterweight and keeps everything level. What we are going to do now though is set up the speeder properly on its display base, pop Ray on top, and take a closer look. For the moment I'm sure you've all been waiting for, here we have Ray fully set up in her scavenger gear sitting on the speeder. And yeah, this is the reason why I wanted to pick this up. It looks awesome. Now, thankfully, because Ray does have a really decent level of articulation with exposed joints at the knees and elbows, she can pull this off just fine, and I don't have any worries about creasing or damaging, because her outfit is entirely fabric. Now, for the main side, that's the side with the netting and where you can install the spear, you can actually use the sash to very neatly cover up her exposed knee joints, and then she looks almost entirely seamless with her knees still fully bent. Now, of course, you can futz with it, and I'm sure some people will do some wire work to get the tassels flowing off in the wind. It's going to look great, and there's so much customizability here. As for BB-8, the display base that JazzInc gives you is very hefty, which means it's probably not going to go anywhere in the display. Not that it was going to anyway. He sits on there nice and securely, he doesn't roll around, that means he sits straight up and down. Sometimes with the Hot Toys base I had a little bit of trouble getting him to sit the way I wanted to, but with the JazzInc one, there's no issues. The crevice is deep enough that it kind of cups around the base of him. As for the way the spear holsters, it's not super clear, but there is a hook at the back where Ray is that it kind of tucks into, and the front just rests in place. I could be doing something entirely wrong, but once again, without instructions, I've had to do a little bit of guesswork and look at the pictures online of what Ray's speeder is supposed to look like. But overall, I am really happy with how this looks. It wasn't something that I was going to permanently display in my collection, maybe just every now and then. But now that I've seen it, this is putting me right back into the theatre watching Force Awakens for the first time. Now, I do want to talk for a moment about the paint applications on the speeder. Ray's outfit is completely weathered and dirty, so is BB-8, so is the spear, and also the netting on the side of the speeder. But the speeder is by far the most weathered thing here. It's filthy. There's dirt and grime in pretty much every crevice, and there are multiple colours and layers at play. The main body section, I guess you could call it, is a nice, deep, but still very vibrant orange. Then over the top of that, there are washers. In the crevices, there has been some shading applied. It looks a little bit more prominent on camera, but in person it blends in perfectly. But by far my favourite detail about the speeder are the sections where the paint has been stripped away and you can see the bare metal underneath. Of course, it's all that sturdy resin plastic, but it's painted with this metallic silver, so when the light hits it, it does look a lot like metal. Now, around the back, the main section that Ray sits on is done entirely in that metallic silver paint, but that's not all. You, of course, have weathering and washes over the top of that, so it's not too bright. It stands out, but not too much, if that makes sense. Now, do let me know what you think of Ray's speeder down in the comments below. Is this a vehicle that's iconic enough to warrant giving it this massive amount of shelf space it demands in the collection? I personally now think it is. After seeing it, it's going to stand out, it's going to draw the eye, and honestly, it's just very impressive. Just wrapping up on the 1/6 scale Ray Speeder by JazzInc. Now, going into this, I was pretty excited, but I also kind of had no idea what to expect. This is the first speeder type vehicle that I've received from them, so I didn't know how the hovering was going to look, or indeed how it was going to work, what the fit and finish was going to be like. But now that I've reviewed this thing, I can honestly say I am very impressed. Is it a little bit too heavy to display on glass shelves? Yes, I think it is. Would I have preferred if JazzInc had gone just a touch lighter but still maintained the structural rigidity just like we see from Hot Toys vehicles? Yes, absolutely. But I'm not going to complain too much because I'm still very happy. The fit and finish, the paint applications, the way that Ray can actually sit on the speeder and look right at home there, it all works marvelously. Then they also decided to include a display base so you can have BB-8 propped up next to the speeder. That's just a very nice and classy touch by JazzInc, and it's something they totally didn't have to do. Now, if you do have the space for this thing, I would say go for it. It's going to catch your eye as soon as you walk into the collection room. Plus, if you're a fan of Force Awakens, I'm pretty sure this is one that you've been waiting for. The Rey figure already comes with all of the scavenger accessories so she can actually wear the correct attire when riding the speeder, so it makes sense if you have this Rey and you've got the space already budgeted for a large piece to go ahead and grab it. Don't forget though, it is third party and it is unlicensed. That means what JazzInc have made here is technically an unofficial product. They don't have the correct intellectual property rights to brand this as a Star Wars item, so bear that in mind when you are making your purchasing decisions. If you are heading down to the description, you will find JazzInc's website, but don't forget this is not a promotional video, this is a review on a product I picked up for my own personal collection. If you are down there though, why not check out the link to 6 Scale Network, the Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.